The crowd roared like a living beast, a tidal wave of voices crashing through the arena as two legends stepped toward the battlefield. Under the blinding glow of the overhead lights, Mike Tyson rolled his shoulders, his muscles coiled like steel cables, his eyes locked forward with that same unshakable intensity that had once made entire divisions fear his name. Across from him, Cain Velasquez moved with quiet precision, the air around him charged with the presence of a man who had torn through giants before. He wasn't here to admire history. He was here to carve his own name beside it. There was something surreal about this matchup, something almost impossible. Tyson, the man who had dominated boxing with an aggression rarely seen in any era, facing Velasquez, the relentless force who had reshaped heavyweight MMA with his overwhelming pressure. It was a fight that shouldn't have happened, a dream scenario fans debated late at night but never truly expected to see. And yet, here they were, two of the most dangerous men to ever step into a combat arena, standing inches apart, ready to put everything on the line. The build-up to this moment had been nothing short of electric. Whispers of the fight had turned into rumors, and rumors had exploded into reality when both fighters agreed to a bout that no one dared believe at first. Tyson, defying time, had proven that his power, speed, and animalistic hunger hadn't faded. Velasquez, a machine of endurance and technique, had stepped forward without hesitation, ready to test himself against a man who had once sent entire generations of fighters scrambling for safety. It wasn't just a contest of skill, it was a battle of legacies, a question of whether raw, devastating boxing could overcome the relentless storm of elite mixed martial arts. As the referee called them to the center, the tension in the air tightened, pressing down on the crowd, making every breath feel heavier. Tyson's fists twitched at his sides, his neck tilting slightly, the same subtle movement he had made before every storm he had unleashed. Velasquez, calm as ever, stood his ground, his breathing steady, his mind calculating every possible scenario before the first strike was even thrown. These were two warriors from different worlds, yet for this one night, their paths had converged into an unavoidable collision. The world had seen Tyson dismantle men before they even had a chance to fight back. His knockouts were legendary, swift, brutal, final. He had made other great fighters look helpless in mere seconds, his fists delivering a level of destruction that left no room for second chances. But Velasquez wasn't a man easily broken. He had absorbed the hardest shots from men twice Tyson's size, had been dragged into deep waters and emerged stronger. His ability to push forward, to drown opponents under an unrelenting pace, had made him one of the most feared heavyweights in MMA history. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Could Tyson's power erase Velasquez's durability, or would Velasquez's pace smother the storm before it could even start? The bell hadn't even rung, yet the energy between them was already crackling, something raw and unspoken passing through the air. Tyson, a predator who had spent his life perfecting the art of destruction, faced a man who had built his legacy on breaking the wills of fighters who thought they could outlast him. The crowd knew what they were about to witness wasn't just a fight. It was a moment that would be talked about for generations. Then, just as the anticipation reached its breaking point, the referee stepped back, his arm raised, seconds away from unleashing chaos. And in that instant, before the first strike was thrown, before the world knew which force would prevail, everything hung in the balance. The referee's arm sliced through the air, and the fight began. Tyson erupted forward, a blur of explosive movement, his fists already coiled with destructive intent. His left foot planted, and his right hand came whipping forward, a shot meant to end everything before it truly began. The impact, if it landed clean, would be the kind that rewrote history. But Velasquez had seen enough storms to know when to move. A slight tilt of his head, a shift in his stance, and the fist that had toppled giants barely skimmed his shoulder. The crowd gasped, their voices caught between awe and disbelief. Tyson had never been the kind to wait, and this was no different. He fired again, a hook, then an uppercut, each one thrown with the kind of bad intentions only he could summon. But Velasquez wasn't just surviving, he was calculating. He wasn't the type to be caught in an early flurry. He absorbed the pressure, moving with precision, his hands darting up to smother shots just enough to avoid the full brunt of Tyson's power. He was testing the storm, feeling the weight of those punches, figuring out what he could endure and when to strike back. Then, in a flash, Velasquez answered. A lightning-fast level change, a dip lower than Tyson had expected, and in an instant, his arms were around the boxer's legs. The arena exploded as Velasquez lifted Tyson clean off the ground, his strength on full display. Tyson twisted midair, trying to find his balance, but the moment was already his opponent's. A heartbeat later, they hit the canvas, the impact rattling through the cage. For the first time in the fight, Tyson was in unfamiliar waters. He had trained for this, prepared for the inevitability of the takedown, but nothing could quite replicate the relentless pressure of Velasquez pinning him down. The former UFC champion wasted no time, locking Tyson's hips in place and unloading short, crushing elbows. Each strike carried the weight of a lifetime spent perfecting this craft, and for the first time in the fight, Tyson wasn't dictating the pace. But the fire in his eyes never dimmed. A sudden shift in his hips, a burst of raw athleticism, and Tyson twisted, managing to force Velasquez off balance just enough to create space. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He slipped an arm free, pushed against Velasquez's grip, and in an explosive motion, fought his way back to his feet. The crowd roared at the impossible display. Tyson had just stood up from underneath one of the greatest wrestlers in heavyweight history. And then, with barely a moment's pause, he attacked. A left hook flew the moment he gained his footing, catching Velasquez just enough to stagger him. Tyson smelled blood. He surged forward, another hook, another right hand, each one hammering against Velasquez's guard. The fight had flipped in an instant, and now the pressure belonged to Tyson. But then came the twist. Velasquez, staggering back, did something no one expected. He smiled. Not a grin of arrogance, not a smirk of overconfidence, but a knowing smile, the kind that belonged to a man who had been here before. Tyson's onslaught had woken something in him, something dangerous. He wasn't breaking. He was adapting. And in that moment, the fight became something else entirely. Velasquez's smile wasn't just confidence, it was understanding. He had felt Tyson's power, tasted the danger that came with standing toe-to-toe with a man who had made a career out of sending opponents to the canvas. But he also knew something else. Tyson was walking straight into his game. Tyson came forward, the predator in him sensing the moment, his fists primed to end it all. Another hook, another missile disguised as a punch, and Velasquez absorbed it just enough to roll with the impact. His body swayed, but his mind stayed sharp. Then, as Tyson's momentum carried him in, Velasquez struck not with a punch, but with his greatest weapon, his endurance. In a blur, he shot low, driving through Tyson's midsection with terrifying precision. This time, there was no slipping free, no moment to adjust. They hit the mat hard, and Velasquez wasted no time. He advanced, climbing higher, his forearm pressing against Tyson's throat, his weight a crushing force pinning the boxer down. The crowd knew what was happening before Tyson did. Velasquez wasn't going to throw wild strikes. He wasn't looking for a lucky shot. He was doing what he had done to so many before, dragging his opponent into a place they couldn't escape. Tyson struggled, his body coiling like a spring beneath Velasquez, but the seconds bled away, and with each passing moment, his explosive energy had nowhere to go. Velasquez tightened his grip, adjusting his position with surgical precision, and then came the moment that shocked everyone. Tyson, the fighter who had refused to bow to anyone, tapped. For a brief second, silence swallowed the arena. Then, as reality set in, the crowd erupted. Velasquez rolled off, his chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. Tyson sat up, hands on his knees, sweat dripping from his face. There was no shame in his eyes, only understanding. He had walked into a world he didn't control, fought against a force even his fists couldn't break. Velasquez extended a hand. Without hesitation, Tyson took it. Two warriors, two champions, bound by a moment that would be remembered for years to come. The fight had been more than just boxing versus MMA, more than just strength versus endurance. It had been about heart, about pushing limits, about testing the very nature of combat itself. And as they stood together, the echoes of the battle still hanging in the air, one thing became clear: this wasn't just a fight. It was a moment in history, a story that would be told for generations.